Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. EQA Nostalgia here, and you did not read the title wrong. It has been 20 long years since Resident Evil first came out. It's been 20 long years since I sat down at my friend's house and tried to control my character and got mauled to death in the hallway by the very first zombie. And said, hey man, can I borrow this? Because I'm pretty sure, aside from the very first Goomba and the first Super Mario Brothers on NES, that's the fastest I've ever died in a video game in my entire life. However, that's taking into account that I was about 13 years old at the time, which, if you think about it, is really strange because Resident Evil is older now than I was when I first played it. So that's something that has to sink into the brains of pretty much everyone who's watching this video right now. My point is just a really elaborate way of saying it's been a really long time, man, and it doesn't feel like it's been 20 years. It feels like I can maybe accept 10. 10 years seems about right. So what exactly made Resident Evil so special for so many people? I think it's the fact that it was the first survival horror game that many of us played. It certainly was the first survival horror game that I had ever played. Unless you want to count Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th on NES, but we're not going to go there. It's weird because now that I'm older and this is what I do, I know about games before they come out. Back in the day, it just wasn't like that, at least for me. I didn't know anything about Resident Evil until one of my friends mentioned, hey, did you hear about that game where you go into a mansion and there's these giant spiders and zombies and zombie dogs? And I actually had heard of it, and I think it was the official PlayStation magazine. There was an image of Chris standing in the hallway where the dogs jumped through the window. But that's one of the most iconic moments in a video game ever, and was certainly the most iconic moment in that game because everybody seemed to be talking about that moment, that jump scare. And then they did it again, of course, a couple of other times in Resident Evil 2 with the hands coming through the barricade, and then we had the crows breaking through the window. I think the thing that I really remember the most is when the hunters first showed up. Just when you got back from the guardhouse, and it has that cutscene with that weird first-person view, and you're like, oh, geez, what the hell is this? And then it opens the door and leaps into the air and takes your head off with one single swipe. That was my first impressions of the hunter from Resident Evil, and yeah, that was something that really stuck with me. I made sure I started saving up my shotgun shells and pretty much saved them exclusively for clearing out the mansion the second time. And it's strange because there's so many iconic moments in Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, the earlier Resident Evil games that stand out, yet those games were so short. Back then, you could get away with having a game that you could beat in 5 or 6 hours. I mean, people have done speed runs of those games in about 2 hours time. But I don't know about you guys, but I went through and I played every Resident Evil probably 20, 30 times. I've played Resident Evil 1 more than I think I've played any of the other Resident Evil games, only because there's so many different iterations of it. I've played it on PC, I've played it on PlayStation 1, I've played obviously the remake on GameCube, and then I played the remake of it on PlayStation 4, and of course it's also on PC. And then we have, what was that game? Deadly Silence, that came out on DS. So that was kind of like a port where you could use the knife by swiping the screen, I think, and you could blow into the mic to save Richard. And there were all these things that they added to it, just like little side things. It was essentially the same game, but there are so many different versions of the original Resident Evil, and I've played every single one of them. Actually, I can't say that. I have not played the one on the Game Boy. I don't plan on playing the one on the Game Boy. I never played any of the Game Boy. I think there's a couple of them that came out for the Game Boy. I didn't even look at those. They would give me nightmares, and no, don't even mention those to me. I swear to God, that would be scarier. Playing that game would be scarier than a crimson-headed tyrant. If such a thing ever existed, I would rather face that than face that game. There actually was one that they made. There's 2 of them, I believe. Somebody correct me if I'm mistaken. One was absolutely horrible, fucking horrible. And then another one was actually an admirable attempt. And it looks pretty decent. I think it was the one that was on Game Boy Color. I can't remember. I'm going to have to look that up. Alright, so I haven't played every single version. Every single iteration. I lied. Maybe there's a couple out there floating around. Maybe there's one on a floppy disk or something I'm not aware of. But for the most part, I've played the shit out of Resident Evil. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Code Veronica, Code Veronica X, Code Veronica X97-804, Deadly Aim. Who remembers that game? Who remembers Deadly Aim on PlayStation 2? I actually enjoyed that, aside from all the zombies having this kind of like the same drab look. But you could say that about the original Resident Evil, but I don't know. Maybe it just, I don't know. The first time I saw zombies in Resident Evil 2, I thought it was the most amazing thing because they looked different. They actually had female zombies and shit. I'll never forget the effect that had on me. I was like, oh man, they got all these different zombies now. And then when 3 came out, they actually had a fat one. Who remembers the fat zombie? I think he was coming down or up the stairs to the second floor of the RPD. All of these little things that I remember. But Resident Evil is just a phenomenal series. It's a phenomenal series. I can't believe it's been 20 years. I hope they get back to their roots. And I know they're probably never going to do the over-the-shoulder thing again, and they're never going to go back to the classic style. But that's really what I preferred. If Capcom would bring one of those kind of games out every now and then, just like as a throwback title to, to older gamers like myself, that would be great. Info on Resident Evil 2 is still pretty scarce. Hopefully that is going to be a very traditional Resident Evil. I hope they don't go with the over-the-shoulder shit. Something tells me that they're probably going to. I really hope they don't. I want to see it exactly like what the remake was for the original Resident Evil. I just want to do it all again with better graphics, with additional areas, a little bit more storyline maybe thrown in there, something that they could throw on the side that doesn't really mess with things too much but makes the story cooler. That's what I'm looking for with the Resident Evil 2, but this isn't about Resident Evil 2. It's so hard, though, right now to talk about Resident Evil and not mention the upcoming remake for 2. I swear, I think I do this in every video. I think I've even done it in the Umbrella Corp videos that I've done. It's just so hard not to talk about it, but the first Resident Evil, amazing game. It pulled so many people into the world of survival horror. Alright, so before I wrap this up, I want to ask a little bit of a controversial question here. Do you guys prefer the original Resident Evil or the remake of Resident Evil? And the reason why I asked this question is because I've gone on record to say that I prefer the remake. I think that it is exactly what a remake should be, and it did everything that the original one did, only it improved upon it in every single way. Now, there are people who think that's complete blasphemy, and I've seen people who said that it was just an absolutely terrible game, and I can't really wrap my head around that. I don't see how anybody got that, but I want to know what you guys are thinking. Let me know if you prefer the original or the remake. Happy 20th anniversary, Resident Evil fans. I thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.